Hey there, hope your day has been well. Have you ever seen something, whether a movie or a show, and thought to yourself, that's so me? Where the character's emotional state just really represents you to such a degree that you almost felt like this piece of art was made for you, like the creator saw you specifically and gave voice to your personal experience? For video games, this precise feeling is at once more common and more elusive, because oftentimes you're the one in the driver's seat. You experience the story through participating in it, always mechanically, and sometimes through the very eyes of the player character. So the feeling of being directly targeted by the narrative is a more familiar feeling in games than any random show or movie. There are moments and instances in film or animation or the like that may involve you, like this specific situation speaks to me. I've been here before, but rarely do we completely find ourselves reflected in the filmic medium. But sometimes, I do feel this way about certain games I play. A game somehow finds a way to be about me, or really about all of us, at the same time. Games whose narratives and mechanics reflect the player back on themselves and forces them to see themselves within the story. How do they do this? By considering player choice and specifically commenting on your decisions, and often being a little meta about it, move the fourth wall behind the player without telling them, and later revealing that you, yes you, the player, are a part of this world as well. I recently had a rather striking experience with Slay the Princess that left a strong impression on me, and I want to explore that over the course of this video. See what it is about Slay the Princess, and other games that reflect their subjects, that allows them to succeed in this way, and some ways that they don't. Slay the Princess is a complicated beast. In my opinion, it fails as much as it succeeds. So let's get into it, and make sure to stick around for another YouTuber's take on Disco Elysium, I guess. Slay the Princess is about what it says on the tin, slaying a princess. You are dropped into a wood, and the narrator tells you that if this princess were to escape, that would mean the end of the world, so you must kill her. And that is literally all I can tell you without spoiling anything about this game. So if you want your brain to be as empty as possible before starting, step off here and go play the game. It's not a very long thing, and it's like $20 off sale, so it's pretty cheap if you want to give it a lookie. Elsewise, I guess you could skip to the Disco Elysium section, but this is kind of the bulk of the video, so I'll probably see you on the next one. Love you! Alright, for everyone else, let me run you through my first 30 minutes or so with Slay the Princess. Asking questions in the narrator gives you essentially no answers on anything. They are adamant that your role is to kill the princess and save the world, and anything more you could know on the subject will only make it harder for you to complete your task. So they opt to tell you nothing. And with that stubbornness comes an implied choice. Do you have faith in the narrator, or are you skeptical of his framing of this situation? Skepticism is represented here by the voice of the hero, who appears soon after laying eyes on the cabin. And it is up to you to decide which of these two is the voice of reason. You can act on this dichotomy upon entering the cabin, where a pristine blade lies on the table. Your first choice of consequence: take the knife down with you, or don't. I chose not to, and was met with a princess that wasn't out of the ordinary. Soft, gentle, a little bit scared, though asking her questions led to the same dodginess I got from the narrator. Both of them are incapable, or unwilling, to answer your questions. This is the moral choice at the heart of Slay the Princess. Do you trust the unreliable narrator who would have you murder this innocent, caged woman in cold blood, or the princess, whose story also isn't adding up? The game's trying its best to be as even-handed as possible here. You need to make a judgment with almost no added context. Who are you? Who do you trust? How do you handle this? For me, I was trying to help the princess out, and when the chains proved impassable, the princess proceeded to use her sharp teeth to tear at her own flesh. This grisly scene kind of ruined the benefit of the doubt I had given her up until this point.
Brother, what's that?
And I proceeded to attack her. Despite my upper hand, the princess proved more powerful than her build suggested, and she and I died together. I bleed out on the floor with the princess. But hey, at least I saved the world. Or did I? I awake, once again in the forest, once again going to slay the princess, but this time the world has changed. The cabin has twisted, the woods are different, and a couple new voices are rolling around in my head. Along with the narrator and the hero is the voice of the opportunist. As stated before, the hero is the voice that told us to spare the princess, a noble but reasonable figure, giving voice to my desire to trust the princess over the narrator, to be a traditional, sword-wielding, valiant hero. The opportunist is a manifestation of my trickiness, choosing to kill the princess as I did when she was preoccupied, let's say. These new voices chimed in more and bickered constantly as I proceeded to the cabin, where we met an altogether new princess. This time, a trickster, reflecting my own trickiness. But to be honest with you, I kind of felt bad about this tricky princess. The voice of the opportunist made me seem like a bastard, and that didn't sit right with me. I bring down the knife once again to cut the princess free, but she doesn't need it. A new dilemma. This princess doesn't trust me at all. I'm in danger, and the blade is my one form of protection against her, but I regret what I've done. I don't want to brandish the blade against her again, so I give her the blade, and she predictably kills me with it. That gesture, though, seems to have softened her, and she, like me, regrets her decision almost immediately after she's done it. Leading to another turn of the wheel, a new wood, a new narrator, another new voice, and a new princess, with this princess most emblematic of our time together. A rose covered in thorns, a princess defined by both the pain caused and dealt. This time, we had a conversation. We're honest with each other about our regrets, how trust isn't something either of us deserve, but it's something we must develop all the same. The voices of cheated and opportunists speak up, pushing me to consider the risks involved with trust. More voices pushing me down the path of doubt and fear. But I didn't want that. I'm forging a new path. I saved the princess, and I freed her. Though I didn't deserve it, she chose to trust me, and I did not abuse that trust a second time, and neither did she. We saved each other in the end. And then the true game began. That is one ending of what must be over 50 this game has to offer. But I wanted to start here because this was my first experience with Slay the Princess. I understood the princess to be someone who is capable of great harm, but isn't an evil person. She rose to meet my violence only after I was violent with her, so I tried to save her. For the rest of the game, I would try to save her. Because the Thorn Princess wasn't the end. To truly reach the credits, you will go through 5 iterations of this cabin, this first encounter, in order to learn about this world, the narrator, and this amorphous creature we call the princess. Your acts against the princess, whether kind or violent, always color how she responds to you. Even that first action, whether or not you take the blade, is enough to change her fundamentally, from a damsel in distress to a much colder, more calculating being who is still unwilling to explain why she should be trusted, but that you should nonetheless free her. From the moment you open that door, if the knife is in your hands, she will be forever changed. Your suspicion is reflected in her. Every action you perform changes the princess. Your thoughts are reflected in both her body and the voices you gather in your head as you progress. This is a game where your path through it, your relationship between your duty and your sense of justice, define what it means to slay the princess. Are you murdering a defenseless woman for the greater good? Or slaying a monster? Nothing more, nothing less. Both things are true at once. She becomes what you believe her to be. But it's still not as simple as that. Each time a path ends, the princess is delivered to a being that is made of all of the disparate princesses, something shapeless and ignorant to the world. But through the princesses, through interacting with you, it gathers perspective and understanding on violence, on love, on trust, and it arrives at a solution above those things, to become gods, eternal in her perspective. In our perspective, should you choose to join her. And you are once again given a choice, or really the same choice on a much larger scale. Slay the princess, or don't. In keeping with my interactions with the princess throughout the game, throughout my playthrough, I chose to abandon this godlike being to return to the first princess, before any of the hurt or betrayal we had caused. And we left together, as people, rather than as gods. My Slay the Princess was defined by trying to save her, again and again and again. And eventually, I did. Slay the Princess for me was a beautiful story. The fact that I can lay out these themes for you like this, it's kind of amazing when you think about it, because there are plenty of other versions of this story in this very game waiting for a different sort of person. This is what I mean when I say this game reflects the player. My version of the game was about saving the princess against all odds. But there are other versions. Versions about doing as you are told and slaying the monster. Versions where you're enamored by the power of the princess and accept her divine bargain. With one humorous exception, all endings are valid, so everyone's version of Slay the Princess is correct, which is great! But once again, there's more to it than that. Everything I've described so far has been what was likely intended by the game, how it was written to be experienced. You know, the box that makes up the play of it. But there's more outside of the story and mechanics that suggests a different way to play. Beating the game unlocks the Memories tab, which is a gallery of all the art you've seen throughout the game. It is arranged helpfully by the princesses you found, but the other princesses you haven't met are just silhouettes. Aren't you curious what those princesses are like? Even with the ladies you know, you can see the locked portraits of decisions you didn't make, art you didn't see, how complex your story could have been. Couple that with the over 100 achievements the game has to mark nearly every choice, and the implication is clear. The designers want you to play this game over and over and over, to see everything they made, to suck all agency from the story, to treat what was originally a meaningful narrative to second, third, seventh playthroughs, to treat the princess as a toy, to be played with, bent, twisted until you've exhausted every possibility. Toy with your little princess until there's nothing left. Toby Fox is a man who seems spellbound by agency in video games. His two most successful works both play with your choices by placing you in a traditional RPG setting with assumed agencies. In Earthbound, which Undertale's a riff on, you fight and defeat enemies, gain experience, level up, all that jazz. In most RPGs, these actions are just how one plays the game. You're not supposed to consider the ramifications of destroying these lizards, for example. But Undertale makes these mechanics load-bearing to the story. You aren't defeating these monsters, you're killing them dead. And the loss of that soul, even someone as isolated as a single frog in the ruins, has a big impact on the setting. What does it say about you that you're willing to take the life of a person? Any person. Undertale, therefore, plays with your assumptions of what an RPG is by attempting to make a non-violent RPG wearing the skin of a typical, combat-focused RPG. Most of the endings explore how the relationship between its characters change when some of them are conspicuously gone, or if the general population of the underground is thinner as a result of your cullings. But if you killed no one throughout your original run, the game pushes you towards the true pacifist ending, where every character, yes, even that one, gets the send-off they deserve, and everything is as beautiful as possible. But then you turn the game back on, at some point in the future, and this time Flowey appears to have an earnest conversation with you. Right now, this moment is locked into your computer's hard drive. All of these characters are happy and living their dreams, thanks to your actions. But if you choose to play the game again, you'll be taking all of that away, throwing them back into their anguish again, an action Flowey compares to his own wants and actions over the course of the story. If you do this, you're no better than he was. By this point, you know that Undertale is a very meta game, but this here makes it explicit that Undertale doesn't see itself as a game. It's not some toy, it's a place and a setting, a world with genuine people living real lives. And if you care about them, if you actually care about them, you won't reset the game. You will leave them like this, and ideally, delete the game from your hard drive. Leave them to their happiness. Because if you don't, the only place to go from here is down. Kill characters in different combinations. Kill Papyrus to see how Sans feels about it. Kill only Papyrus to really twist the blade. Kill every monster in the world but none of the primary characters. Hell, kill them all! I'm serious. Wouldn't it be crazy if we just sat here and committed ourselves to the boring, systematic slaughter of every f***ing creature in this entire place? Just to see what it's like? Just to feel something again? Despite this being the exact opposite of Undertale's intended message, Toby Fox made plenty of exclusive content for the Genocide run, enticing completionists with a fresh playthrough of bland swinging, unrewarding bosses you kill in one hit, spending way too much time in an area making sure that you've absolutely killed everything that's in it. Gameplay and story and pacing all intentionally ruined as you slice through the game. Undertale's last attempt to make you stop by just making playing the game a chore. And if you take it all the way, you are rewarded with a final boss which is genuinely the hardest thing you'll experience in Undertale. And if you manage even that, then congratulations. You have truly treated Undertale like a toy. You have committed the ultimate sin of slaughtering everything in the entire game, treating Undertale and its characters as content to be consumed and your reward is permanent annihilation. No matter what you do past this, the spirit of the genocide run possesses you and corrupts everything past this, even the original best ending. Because this isn't the best ending anymore. The best ending would have been listening to Flowey and shutting the game off, remember? But the temptation was too great, and instead, you became him. Actually, worse than him. You became Chara. Undertale is similar to Slay the Princess when it comes to the narrative weight of your decisions. Undertale takes its world very seriously and treats its characters as real living beings so that your ultimate decisions between good and bad represent who you are. Were you listening to the game or not? Are you the sort of person who needs to see everything, even if it means going against the lessons Undertale is trying to impart? No matter your decision, Undertale reflects your decisions back at you by making you really consider how important these characters are. Are they people or toys to be played with? Are you Flowey, or are you better than him? Or somehow even worse? Undertale doesn't have achievements, unless the console requires them, in which case the achievements are pretty basic or intentionally dumb. It doesn't try to push the players to experience the bad ending, because that's the bad ending. Why would you want to see it? Toby Fox and his crew don't have outside structures pushing you to see more. In fact, the opposite. I've already mentioned how boring and droll it is to play the genocide route, but in every neutral route, Flowey appears in the end to push you in the direction of the true pacifist route, either telling you the things that you missed, or suggesting that maybe you shouldn't be such a heartless killer, in the way that he does, of course. Once you finally do true pacifist, you get that aforementioned Flowey dialogue, where the game tells you to turn it off. That was the preferred experience. Do not pass go. Don't collect 200. But Slay the Princess is not one of those games. For how perfectly I saw my reflection in my playthrough, the achievements and gallery encourage you to see the princess, both game and character, as a toy. And that seems counter to the takeaway they want me to have. Every game, especially narrative ones, has 2 lifespans. The first life is all that time before you hit credits for the first time, where your understanding of the story is still being shaped, your true experience forming in your mind. The second life is everything past that. For some games, the difference between these 2 lives isn't a big deal, but for narrative games, that second life has a huge impact on how you approach the story from here forward. Will the game's story continue to hold significance for the player on their 2nd, 5th, 16th playthroughs? Undertale's stroke of brilliance, in my opinion, is how the second life is folded into the first. The story of Undertale is aware of itself as a game. And because it's a game, some people will see it as a toy before they see it as a story. So make it about that. Fold that into the tale and make it theme stronger if the player falls for that temptation. Slay the Princess doesn't do this, and it's probably too much to ask a game to do so. Undertale is crazy good, most things aren't Undertale, but the second life of Slay the Princess, with its mostly empty art gallery and checklist sensibilities, actively encourages you to forget about the lessons and emotions you held on your first playthrough. Reduce this game down to its choice paths and click on every single possible permutation. Doesn't even really matter what is said, there's a skip button right there, just skip past it. Drink deep of the content, my thirsty children. And if that's your bliss, that's fine, you can play the game however you like. This is just how my brain works. But I do think this makes the story less meaningful on the way out, and that's a damn shame. The opening of this game is essentially an explanation of its genre and themes, reminding us that there are no wrong decisions, just alternate paths and new beginnings, and crucially, that this is a love story. But is it? Is it really? In a game where you're incentivized to find new and twisting ways to take every turn, twist the princess with new forms of betrayal, violence, sorrow, joy, love, lust. Is that love? Sounds like torture to me. And that's the unfortunate thing about Slay the Princess. It has the makings of a cute, tight story about love and trust, about figuring out what you would do when giving competing axes to lean on. In whom do you put your faith? Which way do you lean? What kind of person are you? If only it knew when, or perhaps had the courage, to stop. So here's my review, Slay the Princess. It's a perfect little game, very cute and thoughtful if overly verbose, and gave me a lot to think about when it came to my own assumptions about this world. And once you beat the game, turn it off. Ignore the achievements list, and if you can, try to get your friends to play it, have their own first experiences with it. Because playing any further than that risks diluting the game of any meaning it could offer you. This is one of the concerns of games trying to reflect you. If the game tries to reflect everyone, and then it can kind of become about nothing, right? So pick a vision and run with it. What if we made a really diverse and beautiful internal world for a character, but place that inside a finite person? Not an audience stand-in, not something that's blank slate like Byleth or Rook. Someone who actually exists. And no matter your decisions, this person is who this person is. And it's about how the player is reflected in them that defines the experience. Welcome to Disco Elysium, one of the best games ever made, and I'm surely not the first dumbass you've heard talk about this. I'm gonna assume I don't need to sell you on Disco. If you haven't played it, that's honestly beautiful, and I'm super excited that you get to experience it for the first time. Have fun, mate. But I'm gonna talk about the totality of the game, including directly referencing its ending. So again, just like before, if you haven't played it, my god, what a beautiful thing you get to experience. I hope you have fun. Don't stick around here if you don't want to be spoiled on the whole thing. Mr. Sunset has a diverse collection of voices in his head that represent various aspects of himself. The more you invest in a skill, the more often that voice will pipe up in conversation. These same skills also influence the ways that you can respond, the information you can gain from quest to quest, and, well, everything, really. Because these skills represent your thoughts, and this is a very, very text-based RPG, these skills are the way you interface with the world. So this very first screen defines the texture of your entire game going forward, which probably sounds like a really paralyzing choice now that I put it like that. To make things even more complicated for you, there is such a thing as investing too far into a skill. Encyclopedia being the obvious example. That thing will rattle off absolutely meaningless trivia for you all game long. And I do mean meaningless. While Encyclopedia is really nice for getting a handle on the facts and history of the world, it's never gonna chime in to tell you anything about, say, the body in the tree. You know, the murder, the purpose of your time in Martinez, the reason why this game is happening. Encyclopedia, when left unchecked, is like my friend Barista when you accidentally get her talking about Steven Universe, which is exactly the vibe Disco's going for. Every skill, when pushed to its extreme, is useful for crushing some of the hardest roles in the game. But it also means that particular skill rules your psyche and makes you into that type of guy, you know? Rhetoric is useful for getting into political discussions, but push it too far and now you're a debate bro. Take too much Inland Empire and you're more preoccupied with the phantasms and specters hiding in the walls of this long-dead city than, again, the murder. I tend to go high empathy, which makes every conversation drag on and on as my character's bleeding heart makes them want to hug every dumbass in the city. And yes, that includes the racist ones. Pushing these skills to the limits leads to some real me IRL moments where Harry does or thinks about some stupid shit. And if you zoom out and look at what's happening, you'll go, that's me. And that's what we're here for, right? Harry is a multifaceted depiction of the human experience. Temptation, self-doubt, the embarrassment we all feel sometimes when our conceptualizations of ourselves doesn't match with who we really are. You ever just look around at where you're at in life and go, isn't this a weird situation? Harrier did that so hard he committed ego death. And the capo types and political leanings obviously play into that as well. The politics are self-explanatory. What is your political leaning? Dedicating yourself to an ideology gives you special perks that really change how you operate in the world, how you gain experience, and gives you special quests that give extra insight into the various ideologies, as written from Robert Kurvitz's perspective. Estonia is a former Soviet nation, and thus the ideology of Disco Elysium aligns greatly with the former dream of communism, which honestly I found very fascinating while playing. As you can see by this helpful graph made by this person, most video games in the world are made in a couple of key locations. America, Canada, Britain, Japan, all the way over there. Australia's kind of on the board, France and Germany. Anyway, most of these countries believe in and extol the virtues of capitalism, and that also is reflected in the products they make. We make very capitalistic games here in America. So seeing games that either love or remember the dream of communism was really eye-opening. It's a perspective you never see in my neck of the woods. Anyway, all this to say that if you pick any of these ideologies, the game's gonna make fun of you, but it has something special tucked away for those communist Harrys, pointing out the inherent flaw of being a capo communard. You are literally a weapon of the state, you idiot. You stand for the system. You, of all people, are not dismantling capitalism. And the capo types are, as Noah Caldwell-Gervais put it in his video on Disco, how you respond to despair. When you've truly messed up, what do you do? Do you live in denial, partying or drinking your cares away? Do you damn the world and act like it doesn't matter because we'll all be dead soon anyway? Who cares about responsibility or accountability? Do you apologize, even if it's just a performance of apologizing, dumping your personal need to feel accountable? Or are you a non-committal blob of boring? This is another way the game makes fun of you. It picks up on how you respond to others. Do you tend to pick the excitable answers? The normal ones? The artful ones? Do you talk about killing yourself a lot? The game will notice that and reflect these choices back at you through your thought cabinet, which is essentially you locking in what kind of person you are. These 4 mechanics come together to find what kind of Harry you're making, which may lead to some very revealing experiences. I think that's in part the magic behind Disco Elysium. In other RPGs, you can pick between warrior, rogue, or mage, choose to be a dwarf, lizard man, elf, you name it. But very few of them ask you to consider what kind of person you are, or at least considering it on a deeper level than, are you good or cartoonishly evil? And then react to that information. Making dialogue choices isn't hard, right? You're not starting the game thinking, I'm gonna go neoliberal on this run. You're just clicking on the dialogue that speaks to you. But eventually, these smaller decisions build into a single, greater decision, bubbling to the surface of your mind. Hey, are you bi, Harry? Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. These decisions are aspects of Harry, sure, and even if you don't engage with them, they're still a part of him, and are referenced through the story, like his sixth sense at picking up extra cases like the missing persons case here, and the fact that the only curse word in the entire game that's censored is the one about a bundle of sticks. Even if you don't engage with it, some things are always true of Harry. But there are also aspects of you, if you play the game that way, and if you do, woof. Disco has a lot to say about the human condition, so if you're playing Harrier by making the decisions you would make, you may not like what shines back at you. The end of this game was truly uncomfortable for me, as the game made me reflect on the fact that I've never really experienced societal hardship. This was written in late 2024. Here I am, staring down a man who truly fought for what he believed in, and all I have are words. Even now, what is this video but pretty words I added visuals to? Are words worth as much as action? Because my action is to make videos geeking out about things, and Harry's action? He's a cop, man. He's done terrible things in the name of the state. Words are in a fundamentally different class from action, and even the greatest speeches were backed by mountains of effort for change. Which is to say, at the end of Disco, I was challenged greatly for my political beliefs, and for not doing more to make them actually happen. And that is a political framework that Disco is the most sympathetic to. Imagine what it would say if it actually hates you and what you stand for. It's true that there are some truly despicable characters in this game, but oftentimes these same vile people are given the most humanity when you actually engage with them. If you want to learn about Measurehead, you gotta become a fascist. And in doing so, you can learn about his sad life, both the things that have happened to him, and also that his fascist beliefs give him no comfort. For all of the deserter's ironclad beliefs about the failed revolution and the people across the pale, the visceral rage he still feels, it was something perfectly human and selfish that made him commit that crime. There's nothing collectivist about jealous lust, wanting something that was never yours to take. There are very few people who are treated as truly monstrous by Disco's writing, and that's an impressive feat. To return to the top, Disco is a game that pays very close attention to what Harry you've been making as you play the game, and comments on it in the form of thoughts and thought cabinets. Harry can be a wildly different character from run to run, but that doesn't mean he can't still be relatable. There are all kinds of people and experiences found within the Tequila Sunset. If this playthrough is more roleplay than personal experience, there's still a good chance you've met a person like your Harry, because Disco's writing is just so stellar. It also helps that Disco had been in development for at least 7 years and was an idea for much longer than that. The depth and texture of your writing can really sing if you're allowed to work on it for so long. It reminds me of the Forgotten Realms, the default setting for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Forgotten Realms was originally made by Ed Greenwood when he was a child, but he eventually started writing modules for D&D in the Forgotten Realms setting in the late 70s. And ever since then, I don't know the number, tens, maybe hundreds of people have had a hand in fleshing out this world with insane levels of detail and minutia for lore nerds to pore over. The longer you let a world develop, the deeper it can get. And I am aware that George R.R. Martin is in the background as a negative example of this. This isn't a foolproof, perfect writing technique. Regardless, Disco Elysium's world is similarly dense and thoughtful because nearly a decade of thought and writing went into it. Moral of the story, dense worlds allow for a plethora of characters to be found within them, meaning your player can feel at home somewhere in the world. And that's a benefit that Disco doesn't necessarily share with Forgotten Realms, but it does have a multifaceted main character that everyone can find a piece of themselves within. It may be a little uncomfortable to imagine how alike we are to Mr. Dubois, this mentally broken, drug-addled, abusive, white, middle-aged who's great on a case but terrible in his personal life. But when was the last time you met someone who's perfect? Humans are complicated, contradictory, compulsive, and we're often our own worst enemies. And in that way, Harry is a perfect representation of us all. A deeply flawed man whose support system is tired of dealing with them. But sometimes it takes just one good person, one good weekend, to turn you around. Or not, that's human too. To summarize, making a game that reflects the player means making a multifaceted experience where the other choices you could have made feel like impossibilities, right? Your experience, and your friends' experiences, and any distinct playthrough of Slay the Princess, Undertale, or Disco Elysium feels like the canonical playthrough. And that's not easy to pull off. Slay the Princess is almost perfect in this regard, and then the outside elements of the game get in the way of that perfect initial package. And although Disco is not even remotely trying to represent everyone, it does approach all its characters with a great deal of care and precision, from every NPC to the Lieutenant W. Frater himself, telling a story that is deeply human, from its beautiful moments to its ugly ones. Perhaps the reason why Disco Elysium has become such a modern classic in such a short time is this dichotomy. Nobody's lived a perfect life, Harry sure as hell hasn't. And that's one of the most consistent things you can say about living. It ain't perfect, but we strive towards it every day. So make sure to try out Slay the Princess, because it's worth it despite its flaws. And as always, I am Super Dude. Thanks for watching. It worked. If anything, it needs to be higher up.
Yeah. Jeez.